Disaster by design. Testing the business kill switch.
The Chief Information Security Officer looks across the conference room table at the Chief Operating Officer and says, "If we flip this switch, there is a real chance we break revenue for the afternoon." The Chief Operating Officer pauses, thinks about targets and board expectations, then nods anyway. Somewhere in the background, an outage plan waits in a runbook. But this is not just another maintenance window. The company is preparing to take a real system down on purpose, in production, to find out whether the business can survive its own kill switch.
This Wednesday headline feature from Bare Metal Cyber magazine, developed by Bare Metal Cyber, is about that decision. Choosing evidence over comfort when it comes to resilience. When leaders talk about disasters, the conversation often stays abstract. They look at diagrams, review continuity plans, and repeat reassuring language about redundancy. Kill switches sound like something from a movie, but modern businesses are already full of them. They are hidden inside identity systems, cloud platforms, device management tools, domain name system services, deployment pipelines, and critical vendors. A broken integration, a bad policy, or a provider outage can disable the company just as surely as a dramatic red button. Disaster by design asks a blunt question. If one of those switches is tripped for real, can you prove the business will survive? Or are you trusting assumptions that have never been tested? Over the next few years, regulators, boards, and customers will care less about the story you tell and more about the evidence you can show. Stress when an important dependency fails. The strongest companies will be able to say, "We pulled our own plug this year, and here is what we learned and fixed." That kind of confidence starts with one uncomfortable moment, the day leaders agree to pull the plug on purpose. There is always a pause before a deliberate outage. The change window may be approved. The blast radius may be defined. Rollback steps may be documented. But as the countdown begins, everyone feels the tension. This is not a tabletop exercise. It is not a lab test. A production kill switch test can affect real customers, real revenue, and real reputation. That tension is exactly why the test matters. It puts hard evidence behind years of confident statements about resilience. It exposes whether leaders truly believe their own assurances. For many organizations, the first intentional outage becomes an uncomfortable mirror. You discover that a critical person is on vacation, an escalation path still points to a departed engineer, or a dashboard that looked great in slides becomes noisy and confusing under pressure. Teams fall back on personal contacts, old chat rooms, and informal workarounds. Leaders notice which metrics people actually watch when they are worried, and which processes quietly disappear when time is short. That is why the first experiment must be designed carefully. A responsible team does not start with the most dramatic scenario. It starts with a failure that is meaningful but survivable. That might mean disabling a primary identity integration for a limited set of workforce applications, or simulating the loss of a single cloud region while keeping others available. The goal is not chaos. The goal is comparison. What did leaders believe would happen, and what actually happened when the switch moved? Most organizations still talk about the kill switch as if it were a single obvious device. In reality, today's technology stacks contain many silent kill switches created by normal design decisions. A centralized identity platform can become the master switch for workforce access, and can become the single point of failure for deployment, scaling, and operational access. Coupling is what turns these useful systems into dangerous switches. An endpoint management tool is valuable until a bad policy disables thousands of laptops at once. A deployment pipeline is powerful until a compromised build system or revoked signing key stops software releases across the company. A billing platform may support finance, customer portals, and revenue recognition until one outage blocks all three. Each system may be sensible on its own. Together, they can create a tightly bound business where certain failures have a much larger blast radius than anyone expected. Too many leaders discover those patterns only during a real outage, when options are limited and workarounds are improvised under stress. A better approach is to map hidden kill switches before they fail. During architecture reviews and vendor renewals, leaders should ask direct questions. If this platform is unavailable or misused, what stops working? How long does it stay down? Who owns the recovery path? Identity, DNS, device management, deployment tooling, cloud platforms, and critical vendors should be treated as first-class resilience objects, not background utilities. Once those hidden switches are visible, organizations can test them deliberately instead of waiting for an attacker, a vendor, or bad luck to choose the moment.
On paper, many companies appear to have strong continuity practices. They have recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives, runbooks, and test calendars. The problem is that many of those tests are designed to pass. They are scheduled in advance, staffed with the most experienced people, run during quiet windows, and often performed in environments that only approximate production.
Those exercises may prove that the team can follow a script. They do not prove that the business can survive a messy, coupled failure at the worst possible time. Real incidents rarely behave cleanly. They happen during holidays, quarter close, major launches, or staffing shortages. Multiple systems may fail at once. Monitoring tools may send conflicting signals. Vendors may respond more slowly than contracts imply because they are dealing with many customers at the same time. The neat recovery numbers that looked good in a presentation start to collide with the human reality of recovery. There is also a social problem. No team wants to be remembered as the one that failed the big annual exercise in front of executives. That pressure pushes scenarios towards safer choices. Reports focus on objectives met, not near misses, lucky breaks, and improvised shortcuts. Over time, "we have tested this" becomes a shield against harder questions. Disaster by design challenges that pattern. It trades perfect pass rates for a more honest view of how the organization behaves when a real switch trips. Designing a responsible experiment begins with restraint. Leaders should not turn production into a stunt. They should choose one or two critical switches that already matter, such as a primary identity provider, a key DNS platform, or a cloud region carrying major load. Then they should ask, what is the smallest, meaningful failure we can simulate that will teach us something new? Clear learning objectives come first. Are you testing detection, decision speed, customer impact, technical recovery, or handoffs across teams? Then come guardrails. Which users, regions, customers, or systems can be affected? How long can the test run? What technical controls keep the blast radius contained? What conditions trigger an immediate stop? The organization also needs to decide who has authority to abort the exercise. No one should be improvising governance while systems are under pressure. Disaster recovery and business continuity teams should be involved, but the point is not simply to replay existing runbooks. The point is to discover where those runbooks bend, conflict, or break when a real system changes state. A useful experiment is heavily observed. Logs, metrics, and traces should be collected deliberately. Someone should also capture human observations, confusion, delays, unclear ownership, surprising workarounds, and decisions that took too long. Stakeholders should be briefed in honest language about what could go wrong, what customers might see, and how rollback will work.
After the exercise, the most important outcome is not simply that systems came back up. The real outcome is a prioritized list of gaps in architecture, process, ownership, and communication that no tabletop exercise could have revealed.
A deliberate outage that ends with "we survived" is only a partial success if nothing changes. The real value appears when leaders use the evidence. Results from these tests can inform product roadmaps, vendor negotiations, architecture decisions, and budget priorities. It is much easier to argue for identity separation, multi-region capability, or vendor diversity when you can point to actual minutes of lost productivity or specific delays in restoring access.
Evidence changes the conversation from "we might have a problem" to "we just watched the problem happen under controlled conditions."
It also sharpens investment. Instead of saying "improve redundancy," leaders can target specific weak points. Maybe the test exposed a single admin process that blocked recovery. Maybe it revealed a cloud dependency with no tested alternative. Maybe it showed that a vendor's support model collapses during a broader outage. The response can then focus on creating real options in a crisis. That might include decoupling identity domains, reducing cross-region blast radius, creating limited offline modes for critical operations, clarifying platform ownership, or improving cross-training across business and technology teams. Culture determines whether this practice survives. If the post-mortem becomes a blame exercise, teams will resist future testing or narrow the scope until every exercise is easy. If leaders thank teams for surfacing painful truths and commit to systemic issues, the practice becomes a source of confidence. Over time, a rhythm forms. Design the exercise, run it, learn from it, fix what broke, and test again. The organization develops a story it can share with boards, customers, and regulators. Not that everything is perfect, but that it regularly breaks carefully chosen parts of itself on purpose and uses the discomfort to become harder to kill.
At its core, disaster by design is about refusing to outsource the company's fate to optimism. It marks the shift from believing you are resilient because plans exist to knowing you are resilient because you have deliberately broken things and recovered.
That first decision to pull your own plug, inside careful limits, is a decision to accept a small amount of controlled risk in order to avoid a much larger uncontrolled failure later. Once leaders internalize that mindset, resilience stops being a narrow compliance exercise. It becomes a design constraint for how the business operates. Hidden kill switches are named and managed. Tests are redesigned to expose fragility, not just produce applause. Budgets move toward dependencies that experiments have proven to be brittle. The next step is not to schedule a dramatic outage just to prove courage. The better starting point is to ask 3 sharper questions. Which systems in your environment currently act as kill switches for the business? When was the last exercise that made leaders genuinely nervous? And what actually changed afterward? If your leadership team cannot answer those questions clearly, disaster by design is not about heroics. It is about beginning a disciplined practice of finding out how hard your business is to kill, while you still control the timing, the scope, and the terms. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.